Thank you everyone so much for being here this morning. We may have some more folks join us, but we're going to kick it off. I want to welcome you to our webinar. My name is Jess. I use she, her pronouns, and I work for Arts Alliance Illinois. A couple of quick things today. We would love you to continue to introduce yourselves in the chat. We want this to feel like an interactive, participatory event. So if you haven't already, let us know your name, your pronouns, your location, and your art practice. We do have ASL interpretation today. So if you're not able to see those interpreters, they should be spotlit to your screen. Go ahead and use the three dots in the side of their Zoom window to pin them and make sure you're able to access that feature. I am really excited today to be kicking off day one of our second in the series that we've done as the Arts Alliance Help Desk, really geared towards resources for creative business owners. We have a lot of exciting programs throughout this week. We have two incredible experts here today that I'm really thrilled to hand it off to in just a couple minutes. And I want to say too that this program is made possible by the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. It's really focused on figuring out some more ways to help the creative sector in Illinois thrive. Again, we want to encourage you to use the chat and the Q&A throughout. I want to go over our plan for today's program. I'll give you a little overview of Arts Alliance Illinois and our help desk for those of you who might be joining us or joining an Arts Alliance program for the first time. And then we will pass it over to our incredible experts to really talk about two key parts of expanding and growing your creative business, thinking about business planning and thinking about how to understand sales tax as an artist. Again, we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end, but I do just want to make sure you all use that chat, use that Q&A function throughout. We really want to hear from you. Before we get into the presentations, a little bit about Arts Alliance Illinois. We are a statewide arts advocacy organization working to build the creative sector's power through advocacy, policy change, and connection to resources, which is what this part of our work looks like. We have a statewide network of all disciplines throughout different counties and cities in Illinois, and we're really excited to be expanding our programming through a variety of different offerings. So we do a lot of advocacy work, organizing in the creative sector, in addition to research and direct services technical assistance, programs like this that really try to give creatives the resources to navigate complicated government systems, public funding, and really make sure that creatives like you all can get access to the funding and grants and programs that are out there to support your creative ventures. The help desk is here for arts and creative culture bearers, really across disciplines, to be a resource to you, to help you navigate public funding for the arts, to find support for your creative venture, to figure out if you're eligible for certain grants. And we have folks on staff who are, including some here today in our webinar, who are really here to give you that one-on-one support, in addition to walking you through specific applications as applicable. We have lists of public funding opportunities that are coming up in the state, as well as federal public opportunities. So public funding opportunities. So I really encourage you to visit our help desk for more, including more programs like this. As I said, this is kind of the second iteration of our series about creative businesses. We had one in May that was all about starting your creative business. And we also are focusing part of our resources on supporting creative nonprofits, starting and expanding. So stay tuned for some more programs about creative nonprofits at the end of July, and some more individual one-off workshops that are really interesting and exciting, focus on, again, giving you all the resources that you need to thrive. All of our programs are recorded on our Arts Alliance YouTube channel. So if for some reason you aren't able to make it to the ones that you are most excited by, never fear. And we have a lot of exciting programs coming up throughout the summer. So you can find out about all of those things on the Arts Alliance newsletter, as well as on our social media. Today, as I mentioned, this program is a part of a series that we're holding this summer, focused on giving your creative venture the resources you need to thrive. Our program is really focused on these two key aspects today, but tomorrow we're going to be going over marketing and social media for your creative business. And then on Thursday, we have a really cool program on trying to understand contracts as an independent creative and as a small business owner, and thinking about insurance for your small creative business. So I'll drop links in the chat for you to register for that. And again, keep an eye out for more programming from the help desk soon. That was all a lot of setup and framing, and I want to get you all to the resources and the programming that you're really here for today. So I'm really excited to pass it over to Teresa McCloy to introduce herself and walk us through some key frameworks on business planning.
Well, thank you, Jess. It's so great to be here with all of you. I am going to be sharing my screen uh, with some of these resources, but I'm also going to drop right now into the chat my podcast called the Doing What Matters podcast, because on my podcast, I'm actually in a series right now called The 7 Ps of Business. So much of what I talk about today, you can actually start right with this podcast episode, number 282, and you can walk through and listen and get free downloads of all the content that I'm going to share with you today. So I am going to share my screen here real quick. And then I want to be able to see the chat as well. And so somebody give me a thumbs up or a yes in the chat if you can see my screen, because I just want to make sure that you all are seeing everything. So if anybody's able to type yes into, oh, yay, thank you all. That way I know you're out there and you're listening. Sometimes on a webinar, it's like, you're there, right? So I love to have you participate. So I am going to ask you to type some things in the chat as we go along. And I'm going to approach this idea. I'm a creative myself, as a business owner, a coach, a writer, an author, a podcaster. And so, as a creative, I know that sometimes how we take in information can be a little bit different. So, I have really simplified down into 7 key areas. So even though we're talking business planning, it's not going to be the traditional business planning that you might be familiar with. I'll leave that more to the attorneys and the legal work. I'm really going to be looking at your whole self. As you look at your creative business, what are the 7 key areas that you want to pay attention to as you look at your business and you really build a sustainable business that doesn't feel overwhelming? Because when we become overwhelmed as creatives, we stop creating, and that's not what we want to do. So we're going to dive in. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, and then at the end, after Mary Kay shares, our other expert on the panel today, um, we will have some Q&A time. So you could either type your questions into the chat as you go, and Jess will try to capture some of those, and then we'll come back to them during Q&A. But let's dive in. So what I'm going to give you is an overview of 7 areas that I feel like are important for you to pay attention to in your business. And then you see down here at the bottom on each of these graphics, I have the numbers 1 through 5. What I'd love for you to do is grab a piece of paper, a napkin, whatever you have handy, and just give yourself a rating on a scale of 1 to 5, how you feel like you have done so far in this area of your business. Now, if you are brand new, I saw several of you in the chat say, this is new to me. It's okay if in every area you're like, I'm at a 1, but there may be some things you've already done, such as developing out your product, that you may feel like is a little higher in the scale. So this will give a place after this call to really say, these are some things I need to pay attention to in my business. So the first one that we're going to dive into is purpose. And this may sound like a little pie in the sky or, oh, this is so much thinking. But believe me, as you're building a business, if you build a business without a purpose, we're a little bit lost in our direction. So I really encourage you to look at these 3 areas underneath purpose. One is just writing some sort of mission statement. What is the why behind what you do? Did you do this to make a certain level of revenue? Are you creating what you're creating because it's part of a nonprofit that you want to run? What is the why? Why do you get up every morning or 2 or 3 days a week if this is a side business, a part-time business? Why do you do what you do? In with that mission statement might be, who is your services or products for? Who are you selling those services or products to? How are you serving the community with something that you might be doing if you're part of a nonprofit creative organization? But a mission statement is huge. Trying to keep it to a couple of sentences, but you might just brain dump a whole bunch of ideas and then start to put those together into some sentences and form something that you could have in front of you to be, this is the reason I do what I do. Then, one of the next parts of purpose is, what are the core values that you would put behind your business? Now, values are things that you believe in. They often tie to the mission statement. I'll give you an example of my core values here at the company. Ours are to be real, to be present, to bring joy, and to create impact. So they're just these short little statements that I have here in my office that I share with others that serve and work on my team so that they know how we show up with the products that we create and with the way that we do business. So, mission statement and core values become these guiding principles in your business or your nonprofit, depending on which area you're serving in. The only difference really, right, between business and nonprofit, they have a lot of these same 7 areas of business. It's just how they're set up and how they're run. Again, I'm not gonna get into all the legalities of that, but I would love for you, either as a solopreneur, meaning you work by yourself, or as an entrepreneur, meaning you have others that work with you, either as employees or contractors, or as a nonprofit, we all need a mission statement, some core values that make our business. These are the ways we do business with others. And then a vision statement. Now, a 3-year vision is, where do I want to be 3 years from now? And this gets a little bit more into the nitty gritty. I want to create this much revenue. I want to create this many new products. We want to have this many people participating. I love to see for a newer business in the first 3 to 5 years, somewhere between 8 to 10 vision statements. It could be something very simple. We're building our website. We are growing an email list. We're sending a newsletter. We're writing a book. I just wrote a book in 2022. That was on my vision list. So you can look at those 8 to 10 statements on a regular basis to say, what am I doing right now that will get me to there down the road? So that's all around purpose. If you're willing to be brave, I would love for you to just rate on a scale of 1 to 5. How do you feel right now about your purpose? And if you'd like to, drop that number into the chat. Oh, look at that, Jen. I love it. She's given herself a 5. So this is either for you, for your organization, and it's okay if you have a 1. That means you're just starting. You're just looking at this. Many times as creatives, we build our products and our services first, and then we go back to the drawing board and say, oh, maybe I need a purpose. Maybe I need a plan. Maybe I need a vision. Okay, so that's purpose. Now let's dive into the next one, and it's called plan. Wow, I love these numbers. Y'all are doing great. So let's look at plan. So when we talk about having a plan in our business, that means we're running our business like a business. Now, I don't want you to hear overwhelm in that statement. I don't want you to hear, oh gosh, I didn't want to create another job for me to go to. A plan means that on a consistent basis, you're doing about every 90 days or so, kind of a vision meeting. Now, a vision meeting for a creative can be really fun because that means we get to get up on the balcony and really go back to that vision statements and say, where are we at? What are we doing? What are we going to create in the next 90 days that's going to be fun? I love to work in 90-day processes, breaking it down into 4 different quarters of the year that I'm working on things. And that's what I call quarterly projects. So having that creative up on the balcony time where maybe you get away for a half a day, go to your favorite coffee shop, meet with your coach, meet with your mentor, meet with someone to get up on the balcony and say, what I'm going to do in the next 90 days. And then you break those down into quarterly projects. I am going to create this product. I'm going to do this many chapters in something that I'm writing. I'm going to record this many YouTubes or podcasts or whatever it is that you like to do there. Our organization is going to grow by this much. Whatever it might be, defining what that project is in the next 90 days and writing down some actionable steps around that project. And here's the key, then putting it on your calendar. Where are you going to work on that project? And I talked a little bit about this time management on the last workshop that I did with the Arts Alliance. So you can always go back and look at that one as well. Then if you have someone that works with you, having consistent meetings with them. Now, I know we don't love meetings. I don't want to add any more meetings to my calendar than I have to. But consistent communication with those you're working with is important. So whether that's weekly, monthly, or quarterly, the word that's key here is consistent. So much of our communication can be done in other ways through emails and texts and other applications that we can use with contractors or employees. But there's nothing better than a set aside time where they can come to that meeting. And actually, on the podcast that I have around this topic of plan, I go into detail about how to set up a good meeting and what's included in an agenda of a good meeting so that it doesn't have to last forever, doesn't have to be boring. But rate yourself 1 through 5. Where are you at in plan? I see some of you've already started dropping in some numbers. Where are you at in plan? And make sure you write this down for yourself so you can keep it as well. Ooh, Kimberly, I love it. 4.5, not quite a 5, but you're almost there. I love that. So, okay. So drop in some numbers there and just be honest with yourself. Where are you at on some of these things? Okay, let's get to the third P in our business, and that is our actual product. Now, for some of you, it's not a product, but product is the word that fits under the letter P. For some of you, it's actually a service that you're offering or that you're creating. But for many of you in the creative space, it's actually a product, an actual physical something that you're selling. And Mary Kay is actually going to be talking. I'm really excited about her topic because it's something, when we talk about the taxes on these things, that kind of could trip us up sometime. So there's a lot of things under product. We don't have time to go into all of these. This could be a whole workshop in itself. But here's some of the things you want to think about as you develop out a product is define it. Again, kind of like a little mini mission statement. What is the product or service? Are you selling a physical something? Are you selling a service or are you offering as a nonprofit
Oh,
to serve others? What does that look like?
yeah.
And then how do you develop that out? What does it look like as you develop it? How did you create it? What is the process you need to get it all the way out to production, so to speak, if you're creating something from scratch? That may take a little bit. Now, it may be something that you create on your own, you make it by hand, whatever it is. If it's a service that you sell, what are you selling? How are you going to price it? All of those things are part of that development stage. And sometimes we go back to the drawing board and we redevelop products. I've been in business for almost 8 years doing what I'm doing. And I have redeveloped and redefined and evaluated. That's that last little bullet point over and over again. That's part of the development. Then the second or the third thing is around product is we really don't have a product or a service unless we know who the audience it is, who's going to purchase this product or service. Sometimes we call that your Matt or your Molly. And it's important to create that kind of magical person. You can call it whatever you want. Mine's called Real Life Ralph. And he is my magical person that might purchase my products or services. Real life Ralph and real life Rebecca. They are the people that buy my services. And I know things about them. I know their demographics. I know, you know, where they hang out, where they're out on social media. That's part of marketing. So that goes into how will your audience, your customers know about your product or service? Where are they? Where do they hang out? What's their age range? All of those types of things. You want to do some research around that so you know where you need to show up. Can you sell your product in the local market? Or does your product need to be sold online or your services online? And knowing that about your audience. And then this sounds really simple, but so many times I see, especially creatives, come to this place where I have this great product and they don't even have a way for people to buy the product or service. They haven't thought about how they're going to collect the money. Are you going to have a payment program for people to purchase online? And there's some pros and cons to a lot of those different things because they take out a percentage of what you're selling. So you have to think about your pricing accordingly. But how will people purchase from you? I'll never forget having someone at a marketplace show up and had all their products on display. And I went to purchase something and they didn't have any cash to even make change. They hadn't thought about something as simple as, oh, someone might hand me, I think it was something for $15 or $20. And I didn't have the exact change. And they hadn't thought about being able to make change. Something as simple as, are you selling, at a cash price? Are you selling only online? All the different services. And then, of course, this idea that we're constantly going back and reevaluating our product and our service on a regular basis. Maybe every year we're looking at it, we're looking at our sales, we're tracking those things, which we're going to talk about next. So, on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you feeling about your product or service? How are you feeling, and how are you feeling about the development of it? And for many of you, this may be where you started. You started with a product, you never intended to be in business, but you had this great idea, or you never intended to create a nonprofit, but you have this thing. And so for many people, I find that this one sometimes is a strong one, but there's some tweaking yet to be done. Okay, now we're moving on to particulars. And if you'll notice in some of these things, I have things highlighted in red back here on plan and also on particulars. What the ones that are highlighted in red are there because once you have people you need to add to your team, you'll need to do the things that are in red. Up until then, as a solopreneur, you can pretty much handle the other things until your team grows to a certain level. So, underneath particulars, you'll see I have highlighted in red. It might be time to think about a CPA or a bookkeeper once you get to a certain level in your business, bringing in some experts. One of the things as a creative business owner that I had to learn was that I am not an expert in everything. I need support. Sometimes I need some legal counsel for things like contracts that we're going to be talking about, or for CPA work or business work, or sometimes I need a coach. Sometimes I need someone else to come in and be on my team. So, underneath particulars, what we're talking about is tracking certain things in our business so that we are good, responsible business owners. Things like our revenue and our expenses, things like our inventory, and then something in the business world that's called a key performance indicator. Now, KPI is what you'll often hear for short. And I encourage you to create something I call a scorecard that actually is a place you can do it on a Google spreadsheet or something simple, but a place where you're tracking certain things in your business that tell you the story of your business. That's what a KPI is. You put that all on a scorecard that you might review on a monthly basis. Things like your revenue, your expenses, maybe how many people are in your marketing system, such as your email list, how many people are purchasing certain kinds of products if you offer more than one product or service. There's usually 8 to 10 key numbers that tell you the story of your business. It is totally different for every type of business and product. So I won't go into details, but anything that you just watch yourself for a while. And if you're constantly wondering about something, I'm like, I wonder how many of those I sold, or I wonder how many people were a part of this service that we offered or this program that we offered. Those are things that you may want to be tracking on a monthly basis because you want to see if it's growing or if it's falling off. And this is where you can adjust that product or service. So, key performance indicators, tracking your particulars is part of that. So, on a scale of 1 to 5, I'd love to know, how are you with the particulars? Tracking some of these things in your business. Many times for us that really like to be creatives, this is a hard one. And so lots of times this is something that many people love to give off and get off their plate right away, is someone else to track their numbers, put together the scorecards from them, and give them a report every month. I have an assistant that does this for me every month, and I get the report because it's not something I love to do. I'd rather create content. I'd rather be teaching or training or coaching or doing other things. Okay, let's move on to the next one, and that is processes. Now, this is another one that many times we put on the back burner and we think someday I'll organize my processes. I'll organize the way that I do things over and over again. If you find in your business, whether it's creating the product or service itself, or uh, things that you do in your marketing and your social media and onboarding people onto your team or into different roles on your team or on your board of directors, if you find yourself doing the same thing over and over, you may want to write that down in a process. So your organization might have processes, your financials might have processes, you might have a hiring process, you might have a way that you put together the projects that you or your team is working on. Anything that you do repeatable more than once, you may want to write it down and save it somewhere simple like a Google Drive, or in a Dropbox folder, somewhere you can reference it on a regular basis, because it never fails. You do something, 6 months later, you turn around to do the same thing and you can't remember how you did it. And you're like, I know this wasn't that hard, because you're working in software or you're doing something and you're like, I did this once and I love the way I did it. Write it down into a process. And there's lots of different ways to do this process documentation, but just something simple. This also will help you as your business grows and you want to hand something off to someone else and you want to give it to them to do. You can um, pull out that process, hand it to them, and say, here's how I did it. Here's the step by step of how this works and how I put this together. Again, many times for us as creatives, this is not the thing we love doing because it's not creative. It's really very straightforward to document out our processes, but it is a key part to your business. If you would ever decide you wanted to sell your business, some of the things that someone purchasing your business would look for is your processes and your particulars. All of these things, your mission, your plan, all of these things make your business more sellable if you ever decide that you want to sell it. In this particular place, this might be where you might consult with an attorney, especially on the people processes for like contracts and employee things, Or if you're doing contracts with other people that you're selling your products to, or you're putting your products in the marketplace and someone else is selling them for you, all of that type of thing, you may need to bring an attorney onto your team part-time or on an hourly basis to help you through some of these things. Okay, we have two more that we're going to work through. Tell me on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you with your processes? Where is that showing up for you, and how are you doing with your processes? Okay. Thank you for putting in your numbers. It's helpful for you to just recognize it and write it down. Okay. The last one is problems. As we come into, or excuse me, second last one is problems. As we come into problems, there are all kinds of problems that are going to come up in your business. And, this is where I find for many business owners, they get discouraged. And I just want to encourage you to redo your mindset around problems. Problems are the way that we grow our businesses and make them better. We're going to have to go back and add in some details around some of those processes because the process is broken or it doesn't work anymore because our business has grown and we need to redo the process. We're going to get stuck in some of the projects that we have, and we're going to have people problems, whether it's relational or someone not following through with their work, or we need to fire someone or hire someone, or all of those types of things. You're always going to have problems in your business. One of the ways you can work on those problems is using something I call a mind map, which is just where you brain dump it down, write what the problem is in the center of the circle, and all the possible ways that you could solve that problem. Just brain dump it all out, even if it would be more money than you'd want to spend, or more effort or resources, or whatever it might be. And then choose what you could do right now. What are the 3 or 4 things you could do? May not be the ultimate solution to the problem, but what are the 3 or 4 things you could do? Block time on your calendar to do those 3 or 4 things. And then maybe if it's a bigger something that you have to solve, put that out as a project that you're going to work on in the next 90 days. As a business owner, you're always going to have problems. That's part of it. Is it's never going to be finished or done. That's the fun and the creative part. If you're a solution and you love to solve problems, you're going to love coming to this place of having problems. You might want to jump out and listen to the podcast that I just released on problems. Actually, I think it's coming out tomorrow on problem solving and how you do that, and put it into some actionable steps that you can do within the next week to put down the problem just a little bit, and then also create a whole project to solve the problems. But we're always going to have problems in our business, and we need to recognize that that's part of a growing and good business, is solving those problems. Okay, and then the very last one as we come to close is people. So part of a great business is knowing that we have people that are a part of it. We have clients, we have customers that we're building relationships with. We have vendors that we might be working with, people that we might be selling our products or services to, people that we might be buying products and services from. And then we have a team ourselves that we might be working with. People are a huge part of what we do and how we interact with the world. And it's a huge part of our business. And thinking about our relationships with each of these areas. What do we want our relationship with our vendors to be? What kind of contracts do we need? How are we going to create our vendor list? Who do we need on our team to help us move our business forward? Going back to who are our clients, who are our customers, and defining them. So I want to back up because I forgot to do one of our P's. How are you at problem solving? Let's go back to that one. Rate yourself on that one, if you would. Scale of 1 to 5. How do you feel about problems? And then after we drop a few of those ratings in, how do you feel about your relationships with the people? And which one would you identify that you need to work on? Working on building up those relationships with vendors, with clients or customers, or with team. Thank you, Catherine. She says with vendors. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen as we have walked through these 7 Ps, and I will go back through them just really quickly. So we have, first of all, we have our purpose, then our plan, then our uh, product. I have to think, I have to say them in order. Then our product, then our particulars, our processes, problems, and people. And the reason I've defined them like this is because you can come back to these time and time again with your rating scale. I relook at these 7 Ps every 90 days and I say, which one of these do I want to work on? Which one of these do I want to grow just a little bit more? Do some more research and development around these 7 Ps. Of course, we could go deep into each one of these, but I just wanted to give you a simple framework that you can look at as a creative to say, here are the 7 areas that are key in my business as a solo business, as a nonprofit, as an entrepreneur, that I can grow my business around. And here's some language I can use, even to help my team to define these areas of business. So, Jess, I'm going to turn it back over to you. And I hope it was helpful just to organize your thoughts in that way. Thank you all for participating in just rating your business today and getting up on the balcony and saying, where do I want to grow as a creative in this area, building out my business?
Thank you so, so much, Teresa. That was great. And again, everyone, really appreciate your interaction in the chat. Please continue to throw in your reflections, your questions. I know I even found this really, really illuminating myself. And I'm really excited to see how this is landing on the folks in our chat. We're gonna shift gears a little bit to another really key part of thinking about how to make sure that your creative business has the tools that it needs to be successful. We're going to talk a little bit about sales tax and understanding it in the state of Illinois. Mary Kay, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. And Teresa, great presentation. It was really interesting to listen to you and to hear how you organize these concepts so clearly and helpfully. I love the notion of returning to these concepts every 90 days too, to see where you are kind of as a level setting. I think that's useful to anybody in their business planning, regardless of whether they're creative or not. So hi, everybody. I'm Mary Kay Martire. I'm a lawyer. I work for a Chicago law firm, and I am part of their tax group. And specifically, the work that I do focuses on state and local tax issues. So that means I spend a great deal of my time helping people with all sorts of tax issues, usually companies, but not for profits, individuals sometimes. And in particular, I talk to them about sales tax compliance issues. And can be a challenging topic for people, and it doesn't matter if you're creative or not. And that is because almost every state in the nation has a sales tax system. States kind of operate like fiefdoms. They have different rules about sales tax collection and remission and what they tax. And that frankly keeps me in business, but also can be challenging when you're somebody, particularly a small business owner, and you're trying to be compliant. So I have a slide deck. I'm going to talk specifically about sales tax compliance here in Illinois. I guess the other thing I wanted to say is obviously I'm not a creative, but I am a fan of all of you. I have a daughter who is a creative. Most of the not-for-profit work that I do, the pro bono work I do, is in your industry. So best wishes to all of you. Okay, let me start here, get my slide deck going. And I will share it. Apologies, I am terrible at this. I have trouble getting it to show from the beginning. There we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about Illinois sales tax basics. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the Illinois sales tax system. I'm going to talk about registration and tax payment in case you conclude that you do have a duty to collect and remit tax. And then we're going to briefly review some exemptions and exclusions from tax. Some of these will be less relevant to you than others, but it's worth thinking about in case they are ones that will work for you. No one wants to collect tax if they don't have to. So Illinois, I'm going to refer to Illinois sales tax system, but actually it is a series of four taxes. You may hear the Illinois Department of Revenue, or just in the media in general, instead of the word sales tax, you might hear Illinois refer to what's called the retailer's occupation tax. That's Illinois' word for sales tax. And in Illinois, we apply our sales tax on hard goods. We call that tangible personal property in legal terms, but it's something you can touch, feel, smell, not services, in other words. And Illinois is among a group of states that are still just taxing tangible personal property. That's how tax systems were set up originally, but some states will tax services. And you probably follow the news accounts and you hear over and over again about how Illinois is such a high tax state. And in some ways that's true. We do have a high sales tax rate once you start to add on the local components, but we do not at this point tax the sale of services. So for some of you that are selling services, not hard goods, that means you don't have to worry about sales tax collection issues. And that's a fortunate thing. If a tax does apply, if the retailer's occupation tax does apply, and if it is not collected, the legal obligation is still on the buyer, also known as the user, to self-remit tax on that system. And that is why, for example, you might have noticed on your Illinois income tax return, there is a line that says, did you buy any goods for which you owe sales tax and you didn't pay it, in which case you would owe use tax and you can report it on that return. It's difficult for states to ensure compliance with use tax obligations. And so every state that imposes a sales tax has this two-part system where a retailer that is making sales of goods subject to tax is required to collect and remit that tax to the state of Illinois. If it doesn't happen, then the buyer of the good has a use tax obligation, but the retailer still has the obligation. And that's why it's important to you as sellers. But we also have a service occupation tax, and that is not a tax on the sale of services. But if you perform a service, let's say you're repairing a car, that's an obvious example, and you sell tires in exchange for that, as part of that, the service fee for replacing the tire is not subject to Illinois tax, but the tire itself is. And Illinois has special rules about hard goods that are sold in connection with the sale of a service. And then we have a corresponding service use tax too, where again, if you purchased the service and you bought hard goods associated with that and no tax was collected, you still owe the tax on the items. Well, that's our system. Occupation and use taxes offset. So if you are a retailer and you collect and remit tax to the state, you can reimburse yourself because you collected it from your buyer, right? And that's how the system works. So it's not the case, although the legal obligation is on both the retailer and the user, the tax is not owed twice, it's only owed one time. And that's why when I advise people about sales tax issues, if you think what you're selling is subject to sales tax, and you have an obligation to collect and remit it, you really should do that because you can reimburse yourself, right? You can collect it from your customer and pass it on as the retailer to the state. If the Department of Revenue was to come into you after the fact and audit you and say, hey, you should have collected and remitted sales tax on that, there's very limited circumstances where people generally feel comfortable going back to their customers, sometimes years later, and saying, hey, I should have collected sales tax from you when I sold you that painting 5 years ago, but I didn't do it, so now you should pay it. I mean, it's just a really hard thing to accomplish, and most retailers don't try to do that, but they are nevertheless on the hook. Retailers are nevertheless on the hook for the sales tax.
Mary Kay, I'm going to pause you really quickly. I think we're having trouble seeing your slides. We do see your first slide, but it doesn't look like it's advancing.
Really? Okay. I wonder why that is. Let me stop my share and start again. It's
That would be
advancing.
wonderful.
Yeah, so sorry.
Oh, no worries at all.
They have this
Happens to
problem.
all of us.
Try that presentation mode that you did earlier.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm terrible at slideshows. So I apologize to not get it there. I apologize. I'm going to just talk to you because I'm not having success and I don't want you to have a bunch of dead time here.
You can share it again if you want, and then just
Yeah, trying. It's
make that one part smaller where your notes are.
trying to see if it will open up again for me. Not having any success getting the notes portion to reduce. So let's try this. I'm just going to continue. So here, let's talked about how these taxes offset each other. But who has a duty to collect and remit sales tax? That's an important feature that I want you all to take away from this presentation. So if you are in Illinois and you are making retail sales, those are sales to the general public of tangible personal property, then you have an obligation to collect and remit Illinois sales tax on your sales of those goods. If you're physically present in the state, and that means that you're based here, you have a business that's based here, you have a warehouse that's here, then that's a physical presence, and there is no minimum amount of sales that triggers the obligation to collect and remit sales tax. If you were operating outside of the state of Illinois, you might be subject to something that's called an economic nexus threshold. So say somebody who sits in Indiana and is making sales into Illinois, once those sales exceed $100,000 in sales in a year's period, or 200 separate sales transaction, then you would have a duty to collect and remit as what's called a remote retailer. But I suspect that most of you are based in Illinois and making sales right out of Illinois. And so, and then there is no minimum threshold that you have to exceed, in other words, to have the obligation to collect or remit tax. So what if you say, well, I'm a not-for-profit corporation. Does that mean I don't have that obligation? Sadly, except in very limited circumstances, this does not matter. Not-for-profits generally have a duty to register, collect, and remit tax on their Illinois sales, just like any other entity. That's true even if you apply for and receive a sales tax exemption certificate from the state of Illinois. What a sales tax exemption certificate enables you to do is to buy goods yourself without paying tax on the purchase of those goods. It doesn't give you a blanket authorization to sell goods without collecting tax. And that's an important fact that people need to understand if they're organized as a not-for-profits. And it's a rule that differs from state to state. If you're operating in Texas, for example, the fact that you were a not-for-profit would certainly entitle you immediately to an exemption certificate, and it has a little broader application. But it's important to be aware that generally not-for-profits still have to collect tax, especially in Illinois, on the sales of their goods. The only exceptions there, just in case folks are not-for-profits here, is, sales to your own members. Certain occasional dinners that might be open to the general public can be made without incurring sales tax. But even in that event, the funds that you raise have to be used to further your charitable purpose. Sadly, gift shops or rummage sales, those don't qualify either. So really limited circumstance. Illinois is very particular about that, more so than even other states. So let's say that you say, okay, I'm based in Illinois. I am making sales of hard good. I'm selling art, for example, and paintings, and I think I need to register and collect and remit tax on my sales because I'm an Illinois retailer. How do you do that? Well, what you need to do is register with the state of Illinois to do that. And the Department of Revenue has a website that you can go on to register yourself as a retailer. They call it mytaxillinois.gov, mytaxillinois.gov. You can register there online. And you would file a form that's called a Reg 1 as a business and then identify yourself as a retailer. Then you would complete and submit to the state of Illinois what's called a Form ST1. And that is a form where you pay over to the state the tax that you collect on your sales. So then the next question is, well, how do I know what tax to collect on my sales? That website, the Illinois Department of Revenue's website, which generally is tax.illinois.gov, tax.illinois.gov. That website will also give you information about the rate that you should charge. If you are an Illinois retailer, then you charge tax based on what's called an origin basis. So based on where you are located, where you're making your sales. And that's true even if you're making sales from your home, if it's in Illinois. And there are levels of tax that you have to think about. First of all, what is the state tax rate? You guys may all be familiar with this already, but that's a 6.25% is a state rate, right? Let's say you are in Cook County. You would then have a Cook County sales tax to add on top of that, which is 1.75%. And then you would have the Chicago sales tax as well, if you were in the city of Chicago, as well as in Cook County, and that's another 1.25%. And Chicago and Cook County are not Chicago in particular is not the only municipality in the state of Illinois to have a local sales tax. Most do have a local sales tax component, and there is a tax rate information locator that is on the Department of Revenue's website. You can go on there, you can put in the zip code or the address where you are located to see what the rate is that you should collect. One fortunate thing is that all of that tax that you collect, even though some of it might be a county piece and some of it might be a municipal piece, all of that gets put on the Form ST1 that is then remitted to the state Department of Revenue. And then the state has the obligation to pay out to the localities. There may be some circumstances where, let's say you're having where there might be some form of tax that's imposed that's not collected and paid to the Department of Revenue, but on the sales tax side, really these taxes do get paid to the Department of Revenue, and it's a great help for people. You'll see on the form that there's a place for you to put the where the state tax rate is that you've collected, and they also request detail about what the particular municipal rate is that you've collected as well, and that helps the Department of Revenue pay the pay the local piece out to the localities, and localities are really interested in getting those, getting that funding. It's important to them, helps them pay their municipal bills. And there is sometimes dispute between the Department of Revenue and localities about whether they've gotten the proper amounts and how much detail is spread. Now, how often does this form have to be filed? It depends on how much tax you are collecting. If the tax you're collecting is annually is less than $600, then you just need to file that ST1 and pay the tax you've collected over once a year. And that tax and that return form is due by April 15th each year. Easy to remember since that's tax day generally on our income tax returns, right? If the tax that you are collecting in the course of a year is equal to or greater than 600, then you need to file your form ST1 and pay the tax on a monthly basis. And the tax and the return are due by the last day of the month following the month in which a purchase is made. So let's say somebody buys something from you today. I hope that's true. You have a huge sale, make a bunch of money. Then you were collecting more than $600 in tax in a year, which I hope is also true for all of you. Then your ST1 for June, right, it's going to be due by the end of July, as well as the tax payments over. So I would, and you can file those tax returns also electronically. Again, that site you can access through the Department of Revenue's website. I'm going to say it again, tax.illinois.gov. You can sign up there as a retailer, so register yourself, and you can file your tax returns electronically there too. And it is relatively, I would say, relatively user-friendly for a government website. They update it regularly. They understand this is the way they generally speak to the public. And so, you know, once you have a site set up and you kind of figure out how the returns get filed, it's not a terrible website to deal with. In my judgment, you guys can tell me if you think that's different, if you've been through it. One thing I want you to be aware of is I said that the state rate is 6.25%, and that's true for most types of merchandise. You may know that there's a certain category of items. I presume it's not relevant to you, but just in case, let me say this: sales of food, sales of drugs, and medical appliances are subject to a lesser state rate. They're subject to a 1% rate. You may have seen over the past couple of years that, I think it was last year, maybe even the year before, Governor Pritzker in its budget said, primarily because of federal funding, we have a little excess in our budget. And so we're going to take away that 1% tax on food. There has been a forgiveness of that in recent times. No forgiveness of the 6.25%, sadly. And drugs and medical appliances have continued to be subject to tax. And we are one of the few states that puts any kind of tax on the sale of drugs and medical appliances, but we do it. So that's a way in which we are a less taxpayer friendly state. Now I want to, I already mentioned that the rate you're collecting is as an origin rate, and that's because I'm presuming that you are based in Illinois and you're making sales from either an Illinois storefront, an Illinois warehouse, or Illinois retailer's own website. So by origin, I mean you use the Illinois rate that is applicable to where you are, from where you are making the sales. And that is, I emphasize that because one of the ways in which sales tax laws are currently confusing is that that there are other ways that people make sales. For example, I mentioned if somebody was making sales outside of Illinois, let's say an Indiana artist who had made sales up above our nexus threshold, Illinois law provides that those sellers collect and remit tax and their sales to Illinois residents based on the rate that's in effect where they are delivering the goods. That's not origin sourcing, that's destination sourcing. And Illinois is a state that has both of those things. So if you're talking to a friend who's from Indiana who says, hey, you know, I'm already collecting and remitting, and I collect based on the destination where I sell to. What do you mean? You're an Illinois retailer and you're collecting based on where you're located, your origin. You are both correct. And so I don't want there to be confusion about that. It's a difficult system for people to comply with. So based in Illinois, sales tax rate based on where your origin is. Outside of Illinois, but up above the nexus threshold, so you have a duty to collect and remit. You collect based on the rate in effect where you're delivering the goods to the customer. Then there is a third system, and this is called making sales through a marketplace. And some of you may do this too, but here I'm talking about the Etsy's of the world, the Amazon marketplaces of the world, not Shopify, but places where they're running a marketplace and they facilitate the sale of your products. So some of you may be doing this. So since 2018 and into 2019, most states have enacted laws, and Illinois is one of them, that require the Etsy's of the world, the Amazon marketplaces of the world, as marketplace facilitators to take on the responsibility for collecting and remitting sales tax on sales made on their sites, assuming, again, that they make sales in excess of an economic nexus threshold. But that's, of course, very easy for those entities to get there, right? Because they put together all the sales of everybody who's on their site to determine whether those thresholds are made. So if you sell in that way, and you may sell both ways, you may sell directly and through a marketplace, but if you're selling through a marketplace facilitator that meets the nexus threshold, then the facilitator itself has the obligation to collect and remit tax on your sale. And it should be telling you that, right? And they themselves, the marketplace facilitators, are required to register with departments of revenue, file returns, collect and remit tax on your sales made throughout the marketplace, wherever they're made in the United States. It's really kind of a great savings for artists who are making sales in this way. So to the extent you are making sales in that way, through a marketplace, you should not include those sales on your ST1 forms that you file. The sales you make directly, the tax you collect goes on the ST1, but the marketplace facilitator should collect and remit, and it should report out to you about what it's collected and remitted, and you have the right to ask them to tell you, to confirm that they're complying with the law. Now, if the marketplace facilitator says to you, well, I haven't made sales into Illinois above the economic nexus threshold, so I don't have to collect and remit tax on your behalf, then you do still retain that obligation. And in that case, you would collect tax yourself, even on your sales through the marketplace, and you would put that on your ST1. But again, most marketplace facilitators we're familiar with are up above these economic nexus thresholds, and they have this duty. So hopefully I've said that in a way that makes sense to you, but happy to answer any questions about that. So then I want to finish by just pointing out a couple of exemptions that are important for people to realize. The first is, one of the things I said at the beginning of my presentation was you have a duty to collect and remit tax if you're a retailer selling to the general public, and that means you are making a sale to the end user, right? If what you're doing is buying goods and then selling them to somebody else who themselves is making a sale, then that's called a sale for resale. Or a wholesale transaction. And you shouldn't be paying tax on those, and you shouldn't have a duty to collect tax on that one, and that's your obligation. So if that's your situation. So again, if you're just the wholesaler, you're buying widgets to sell to somebody else, then you have an exemption that can apply. And you may also be able to avoid tax you pay on the goods that you buy for that wholesale transaction. The other thing is, you may make sales to an entity that is itself a not-for-profit, and it may say to you, we have a sales tax exemption. So on the goods we buy, you don't have to collect tax from us. And if somebody says that to you, fine. But you need to get proof from them to verify that this is in fact the case. You need to ask them to give you a copy of their sales tax exemption. And that Illinois Department of Revenue website also has a lookup feature. So you can look up names of entities to see if they do in fact have a sales tax exemption with the state of Illinois. And I caution you to do that because if you are ever audited by the Department of Revenue, that's one of the standard questions you're going to be asked. You're going to be asked to say, okay, show us the list of all your sales, show us the tax collected. Why didn't you collect tax on this sale? Oh, well, it was a sale for a not-for-profit. Okay, well, what proof do you have? Do you have their sales tax exemption number? Can you prove you looked up on the department website and it showed you that they were tax exempt? So you need to protect yourself in that manner. You also, I'll end with this, should keep records of the tax that you collect and remit, and you should keep those. I would recommend that you keep them for 5 years. There is a 3-year right of audit by the Department of Revenue for retail sales tax purposes. It's different periods for different types of taxes, but here for sales tax and at this stage is 3 years. Keep them for 5 years, then you should be in good shape in case you're ever asked about that. So with that, I will stop. Apologize again for being so completely ineffective with my slide presentation, but happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Mary Kay. There are a bunch of questions in the chat, and I think what I'll do is just remind everyone as we bring it to our Q&A section that we would really love to hear from you. What are the questions that you have? Maybe the examples that you're thinking about. We may not be able to get into too specific of scenarios for your particular creative business, but there's a good chance if you have a question about something, someone else might too. So Teresa, I'll also bring you back in here to see if any of these questions might be relevant to you. I see a couple already in the chat about sales tax, so maybe I'll just lead with that since we are, that's fresh on the mind, Mary Kay, if that's okay with you. So Jackie's asked us in the Q&A, if selling and shipping artwork to another state, do I still collect and remit sales tax in Illinois?
If you're based in Illinois and you're selling from your Illinois location, yes.
Great. And I think that's probably a really common question, a common situation for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
I also see an interesting question in the chat here from Kara about sales tax on, I guess what we would describe as maybe a gray area between when you were describing something physically being sold. What about a digital product? So Kara's given an example of a service of a photo shoot where a client wants a digital copy of a photo. It's not a printed, physical service, but it is still a sale, on something tangible, I guess we would say. How does sales tax apply in that kind of situation?
To the extent this is a service charge, the photography services involved in the taking of the photo, that is a service that's not subject to tax. To the extent you're selling the hard good and you have a charge for the photo itself, that is subject to Illinois tax. And you would be wise to break that out in your billing so that you can show the Department of Revenue that you collected tax on the appropriate piece of the charge. There are assumptions in place where if you don't break it out, there's an assumption that at least 50% of what your charge is subject to tax, and that can get expensive if tax is not collected.
Great, thank you. I see another question. Oh, go ahead, Teresa.
I will say too, from my experience, because I do work with some photographers as clients, I would always suggest that you, I'm not going to give legal advice. I don't think Mary Kay is either, but I would always suggest that you research that with someone in your local community or someone that because there are some different things that are out there for digital products, and digital products are very popular now, especially with photographers, as you sell sessions and you do different things. Same thing with the digital print, like selling ebooks and things like that. So just make sure that you've done your every situation is kind of unique to me, and you just need to do your due diligence to know.
It's really good. That's really good advice. I forgot that the question was more generally about digital products too.
Yeah, digital products are such a new marketplace right now and so different. You just want to really check out and make sure from a legal standpoint and everything else that you're doing the proper thing.
There's a great variety between states in whether or not they tax digital products and how they tax digital products. Illinois at this point will tax what they call electronically delivered software, which is software that's the phrase that they use is canned, meaning it's not customized for a particular customer. That they do tax. Every other kind of digital product, they don't tax. They don't tax streaming. They don't tax downloads. And Illinois is somewhat unusual in that fact too. Many other states are increasingly taxing the sales of digital products. And if you live in the city of Chicago, you might be aware that Chicago is different than Illinois. It has what's called an amusement tax, which it does apply to its streaming products. And it is collecting a fairly hefty fee that it's requiring the Netflix of the world to collect and remit on those sales. So very much a moving area of the law.
It's really hard, in this circumstance, I'm going to bat for Mary Kay to give a blanket answer because everything is so different even across the state. I live in Southern Illinois, very different here than it would be, in the Chicago area. So.
Thank you. I see one example in the chat of a situation I wonder if a lot of folks in the webinar might be finding themselves in. It is summer, it is farmers market and market season. And so maybe this is implied in some of your presentation, Mary Kay, but just in terms of thinking about how sales tax applies at in-person events, how would you encourage someone to think about their plan for selling products or services at something like a farmers market?
I find this difficult to respond to for two reasons. The first is I go every week to my farmer's market. I don't, in Oak Park, which is close to where I live, I do not see sales tax being collected. Now maybe those are out of state folks that are coming in from outside of Illinois and then selling their wares and they're not making sales in excess of an economic nexus threshold, but they're physically present in the state. They're making sales. Yeah, I think the Department of Revenue, if you were asked for advice, would say you should be collecting and remitting tax on those sales. So if you're selling at a farmer's market, if you're from Illinois, you are at risk of sales tax collection. I think that's what the advice would be. You ought to monitor and you ought to, think about that in terms of making the sales. Is this something the Department of Revenue aggressively audits? To my knowledge, no.
Wonderful.
Garage sales, same answer. I wish there was a Illinois garage sale exemption, but there just isn't. Now there is a circumstance where another exemption that exists is what's called an occasional sale, and that could apply in a garage sale option. Like right now, I need to have a garage sale. You should see my garage. But the things I am not regularly in the business of selling the things in my garage, which are, litany of items collected over the years that we're no longer using. So I would not have a duty to collect and remit sales tax on those things because I'm not regularly in the business of selling it. So it's distinct from I'm going to a farmer's market, I'm going to an art show, and every week, this is my business, right? I'm in the business of selling this. So you wouldn't have the occasional sale exemption in the latter circumstance, but it could apply to a garage sale.
I would say something there too, and not to open a can of worms, but I just want to make a lot of people probably that are on here aware of, when I was talking in the 7 P's of business on your product and collecting money, how do you collect? Just be very aware of things like Venmo that is so popular now is really not a business program. It is not a recommended way. And so many people that are doing, solopreneurs selling their paintings or their wares or farmers markets or those types of things are doing all their transactions on Venmo. And I would just recommend that you talk to a CPA about that because it's going into, a personal account. Venmo does not connect to a business bank account, which is what you should have for even if you're a solopreneur. So just be aware of some things that, I'll just say it this way, that seem really easy and simple. Oh, this is a great way, are really not meant for a business. And, just check with people that know those things and whatever. I did for about a year. I did Venmo and I was recommended by my CPA. That is not the way that you want to do transactions and even the trackability and all of that. So it seems easy and they don't take out any fees, but that right there is kind of a red flag of let's beware.
Yeah, good advice. And just to respond to a couple other questions I saw, can you just back it out? You're not supposed to. You're supposed to set forth separately what the amount of the tax charge is. And that's, if you think about it, because we have this sales tax, use tax system, that's so the buyer knows that the tax has been paid, right? So they don't have the obligation to self-remit it. That's just one of many reasons why you have that. I think you should also have an accountant may be able to give you some good practical advice about this. I saw a couple of questions too about sales of ads, generally not subject to tax in Illinois, because that's the sale of a service, right? It's not a hard good. Now, there might be some detail about exactly what you're, if you're delivering like posters, that's the ad and the sale, if the part of this charge is for posters to put up around town, that's hard goods, right? If this is, whereas if you're just advising about what the ad should be and not the physical production of something that's tangible, then that would be a different story. Whether it's tangible or not is something we should sort. Yeah, and I see there's been a back and forth on whether Venmo is associated with fees. I have heard people say to me that they do pay some fees to Venmo. I have not seen a feature on Venmo, and perhaps because I don't know of it, but I've not seen a feature on Venmo that would let you break out taxes.
It does not break it out, but there is a business version of Venmo. Jen is right, because Venmo is a part of PayPal. I mean, that's where it comes from at its origin. So there are ways, but it does not break out tax and show it to the customer. So, yeah. So I say, just check your advice and make sure that you have a good setup of that plan.
Yeah. Are there website programs that will handle sales tax for you? Yep, there are. Also, if you're getting a position now that you're selling into a number of states, right? And so you have and you're selling through, well, if you're selling through a marketplace facilitator, the marketplace facilitator should be collecting or remitting the tax for you. But there are services that will take care of submitting your tax returns for you that you can pay, to do that. You still have to set up your system to collect it, right? There's a recommendation for tax jar there. Maybe somebody's using that, I can say. I'm not in a position of recommending vendors, but there are vendors out there, absolutely.
That was one that was mentioned at our last workshop, and TaxJar is one that has a lot of just good free resources on it about taxes in different states and things like that. So
you'll find that.
Yeah, so it is a very reputable, good way to do some of the things people are asking about, I believe.
Yeah. And if you're really just if you're based in Illinois, making sales out of Illinois, then you, excuse me, then really it's an Illinois tax issue, and you may be able to get assistance from the Illinois Department of Revenue too. They have a number of resources on their site, including a nice colorful chart about if you're an Illinois vendor, if you're not, can't quite see this, but anyway, that's helpful, very readable, and the rules are complex, so it helps you follow better. Question about consignment. I would need to know the facts of your particular circumstance and the contract with your vendor too, to see about that too, to be able to answer that. That's more complex.
These are all really wonderful questions, everyone. I want to just encourage you to, take a deep breath as well. These are complicated, dynamics. And again, these two experts here are resources for you, as well as these workshops throughout the week that Arts Alliance is putting on are really designed to help you connect with other creatives who are dealing with the same kinds of questions and scenarios. So it's good to be asking these questions in the chat, sharing resources, and continuing to think about what are some of the other additional questions you might have. I want to encourage all of you all to visit the help desk website, which has resources from our past workshops, lists of public funding opportunities, and ways to find out more information about how to qualify for them, as well as one-on-one support, which is a way for you all to ask questions about your particular creative business, questions you might have, and resources you might be looking for. These are exciting workshops, we know, but also sometimes, as people have found out in the chat, sometimes you need a little bit more one-on-one support. And that's really what the help desk is designed to do.
Yeah, and on this tech question, I can't assure you based on a call like this that you don't have a sales tax collection obligation. You know, I think you need to have more one-on-one assistance is what I'd say to you.
Yeah, Jess, I would say too, you know, from even the part that I shared, and that's why I always share, like, these are the areas that are good basic things in your business. But I think some of our responsibility as a business owner is saying, I also know I'm going to need experts. I'm going to need one-to-one conversations with, you know, certain people who this is what they do every day. And I just want to encourage you all as creatives, you know, we need you in the world to bring your creativeness to the world, and then get the resources for what, don't feel like I have to learn all this and I have to know all this and I have to be an attorney and a CPA and all these things. You know, consult with and use the resources that you have at the help desk and things to do the things you don't have to know how to do everything, but keep creating what you're creating in the world and build that strong business in that way.
Thank you, everyone. I really just want to give another thank you to our presenters today. We have 2 more amazing days of workshops this week. I want to encourage you all to register for them. A reminder that this program, as well as the other ones, if you're not able to make it live, will be recorded on the Arts Alliance YouTube channel. We really want to hear from you all. We want your feedback on this program, what worked for you, what didn't. What kinds of programming and resources do you want for your creative business going forward? Is there a particular workshop or webinar or question that you want answered? That form is really helpful to us in understanding how we can better serve all of you. I would love to see you at a future Arts Alliance Help Desk workshop. But until then, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay in touch and be well. Thanks, everyone. And thanks again, Mary Kay and Teresa.
You're welcome. Bye.